Hi, I'm Corolla, and on Instagram I'm at From Corolla. In this video, I wanted to show you how to do some painting with fountain pen ink. And since I'm cleaning out some of my fountain pens, I thought that I would show you how to reuse some of that ink instead of washing it down the drain, essentially. So some of the things you might need, just in case you're curious or you want to do this yourself: water and paper towel, just in case. Fountain pens that you want to clean out or that have inks that you no longer want to use. Or you can just take a few drops of fountain pen ink that you want to paint with. And then on top of that, I'm going to do a little bit of sketching or drawing. And I'm going to use the Kakimori stainless steel nib, which I have in a Tachikawa holder. But you can also use a regular old Fineliner. The Tombow mono drawing pen is one of my go-tos. This is the 02, so it's pretty fine. And I'll show you how to draw with this as well. If you have that on hand, that's a good one, or a micron works as well. So with the Kakimori nib, I'm going to use the Kakimori black pigment ink. But again, if you don't have any of these, then it's totally fine to use a fine liner. But if you are curious what they look like, I will show you how to draw with that. And then I have some generic paint brushes, which I use for inks only. So you can pick these up at a local art supply store. I think I got these from HomeSense. They were very affordable. And the reason why I just use generic paint brushes is because you are using it on ink instead of regular paint. So I keep these separate from my watercolor brushes and my regular paint brushes. And in terms of drying, so first we're going to do some fun painting with the fountain pen inks. And you can either wait for the ink to dry, which is probably the longest part of this process, or you can use a heat tool like this one. For paper, what I'm going to use is my trusty everyday book from Galen leather. It's blank Tomoe river paper in a notebook, B6 size, and I actually have used this for ink painting, and you'll see that I only use it on one side. I only paint on one side because it does bleed through. It shows through on the other side, but it doesn't go on to the next page. And one of the ways that I stop it from bleeding onto the next page is I just have a leather blotter in between the papers. You can also use a pencil board or a cardboard, and that way it will sort of prevent it from bleeding onto the next sheet of paper. But this paper I found does really well with fountain pen ink. It handles it really well. It shows nice sheen and shading and shimmer, the 3 S's, and yeah, so that's sort of my go-to paper. But you can also use watercolor paper if you want, or another like mixed media art paper, that kind of stuff. So let's start painting. So what we're going to do today is paint some loose florals, which I like to do as just a relaxation technique. My style is loose and freehand, so I don't use reference of florals or flowers. I just kind of draw whatever comes to mind. I let my hand do the work. So I'll take my first paintbrush and I'll use the Bordeaux. Usually my rule is to start with light colors first. So maybe I would do the yellow first, but I think what I'm gonna use the yellow orangey paint ink for is some accent colors. So what I do and what I'm doing is just dipping the paintbrush and then just putting the paintbrush on paper wherever I want and making sort of these loose floral shapes, if that makes sense. So kind of what in my mind I would think the flowers would look like. And then I start to just make these shapes on the paper, and then I judge how much space I have and how I'm going to fill up that space. So because it's a small paintbrush, I don't have to put a lot of paint down. And you can see I'm not using a lot of paint. Okay, so I think I'll leave it at that. Maybe add one here just to balance it out a little bit. And then I'll put my paintbrush aside and I'll use the yellow shimmery ink and I'll add some in between. So what you'll notice is that the paintbrush will touch some of the ink that's already on the paper, and that's fine. I actually like mixing inks while they're wet, so wet on wet. And when I put my paintbrush down, it will pick up some of the ink that's right beside it, and that's fine. And that's why I have the water too, is if you pick up too much of the dark ink, what you can do is just rinse off your paintbrush with water and you can start over. Or you can start again. Or you can let the inks, depending on what color your inks are, you can let the inks sort of blend together on the palette as well. Totally up to you. So I think I'm going to leave it like this. I have some yellows in with the purple or mauve, and then I'll go in, and that's when I draw or paint the leaves. So you can tell this is a unique sort of paintbrush shape, and I find that it's great for floral shapes. So I just kind of dot them in wherever, and I kind of take a look at it in terms of what makes the piece look balanced, and distribute accordingly. So I don't want flowers and leaves everywhere, but I do want it to kind of look like maybe a bouquet, or that they are meant to look together cohesively. So this is sort of like a circular bouquet shape, and I think I'm happy with this. So I might dot a little bit of green in the piece itself in the middle, just to give a little bit of green color in there. And that's pretty much the painting part. So it didn't take long at all. It was very fun. It was free. We didn't use a lot of ink, so that was very easy, I think, to create. And you can tell they kind of mimic flowers and leaves, but they don't look exactly like flowers. So that's where the drawing on top comes into play. And I'll show you how to do that with a nib, a stainless steel nib from Kakimori, and also how to do that with just the regular Fineliner. So you can either wait for your paint to dry, like I said, or maybe we'll try using the heat tool, this one, and helping the paint dry a little faster so that we can draw on top. So my choice of Fineliner is the Tombow Mono Drawing Pen in 02. You can use a micron, you can use any other Fineliner that you want. And basically what the technique is just freehand floral drawing on top of the shapes. So I kind of use these shapes as outlines of where I think some of the flowers will be. But again, I sort of let my hand do whatever comes to mind, whatever it feels like doing. So I might start from here and work my way down this way so that I'm not smearing the ink that I draw. And so these will be leaves. So I'll draw floral leaf shapes, sorry. And it may not be obvious when you're drawing what they are, but I promise in the end it will look more like floral shapes and leaves. And so my first flower, I know it's nerve-wracking, And when I first started doing this, I was nervous, but I usually start with sort of the center of the flower, and then I start making petal shapes. And I'll draw in a sketchy style so that it's not forced and it's very easy and free-flowing. And so with the petals and leaves, I do draw some lines in to show directional shapes as well. And again, you can use, if you use a yellow ink, you can use that yellow as sort of the center of the flower if you want, or you can use it as part of the petal design. So maybe it could be a yellow flower, or it could be the center of a flower that's yellow. It's totally up to you. So what I do like about drawing with a fineliner is that it will dry faster. So this part already is dry. And I think on this side I'll use the fountain pen ink just to show you what that would look like. So this is the Kakimori pigment ink in black. And I'll just dip the nib in and get some of that ink on here. There. Get some of that ink on here, like this. And then I put it down, and I usually start with the leaf because a lot of the ink will come out. So you have some thick lines in there. And what I love about this nib is that depending on the way that you hold it, the lines, the line width will vary. So if I want to draw, you know, thick blobs, then I'll sort of angle it closer to the paper. And if I want to draw a fine line, as in maybe lines on the petals, I'll angle the pen a little bit closer to 90 degrees. So it's the same with the leaves. Depending on the angle of them and the line darkness and width that I want, I'll just angle the nib accordingly. So again, it's not like these look perfectly like flowers or leaves, but I think our eyes do a really good job of filling in pictures to give us that information, to tell us, you know, are those leaves, are those flowers? So I kind of just use that and draw something that's close to leaves and flowers. And we're pretty much done. Like, that was easy too. That only took a few minutes. So you can tell from this side, this is the fountain pen ink. And then this side is the fine liner. So you can use thicker fine liners if you want the lines to be darker. And you can also use a fountain pen to draw, maybe with black ink, to draw the floral shapes in. But I do really enjoy this stainless steel nib because, as I mentioned, depending on the angle that you hold the pen or the nib, you'll get varying line widths. And I think that's really, really interesting in a creative piece like this. And so that's basically it. That's pretty much how I use fountain pen inks, especially when I'm cleaning out fountain pens, to paint a loose and freehand floral piece. And that's pretty much it. So if you have any questions, comments, if you want to see more, you can actually find me on Instagram at @FromCorolla, where I share a lot more of my art process, my painting process, and my drawing process as well. So find me on Instagram, and if you want to see more on YouTube, my process, or anything like that, let me know in the comments, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!